Welcome to another Power Hour presentation from the Canada Growth Network.
Just as a quick kind of overview, I'd like to go over a few things that belong on a resume and a few things that don't belong on a resume that you're going to notice are pretty absent. So, and I kind of like to start with the absence. So, right away, you're going to notice there's no objective, no summary on this. And by the way, we're the only the reason why we rank so high is because we are the only resume website that I know of in the US that only offers one format to choose from. Every other website, whether it's Microsoft, Canva, they all have hundreds of templates to choose from. And they allow people to choose 2 columns, 4 columns, red, green, blue, headshot, no headshot, summary, no summary, icons, doodles, stars, fill up your skill bar. All that stuff is marketing to you. They're trying to get you to select a pair of sneakers. Do you want green sneakers, blue sneakers, red sneakers? And they're trying to convert you into a customer. I could really care less if you convert into a customer with my resume builder, and that's kind of the brand tone that I take with it, is I know it works. It's this. Here are my articulable philosophies as to why. If you want to go through all of my resume advice, not one word of this website is written with AI, not a single word. I write every single one myself. And I figured that people aren't coming to me for options. They're coming to me for clarity. So, disagree or agree with me on this, that's totally cool. I don't mind if people have their own philosophies. All I can do is articulate mine and explain why I believe the things that I do. So for right off the bat, you'll notice there's no summary on this resume template. And the reason is that anyone can write a good resume or a good summary, especially with AI. It is a very low bar to say, I'm terrific, I'm type A, I have all this leadership background, you should totally hire me, here's my objective. What that ends up doing is it puts you on the same playing field with people who have nothing to talk about and nothing to write home about, because anyone can write a pretty paragraph, but not everyone can say that they started a business or that they worked at a Fortune 500 company or that their startup raised $5 million or that they're the first engineer at this tech company. And so my whole philosophy is if you have something more interesting and more impressive than I'm a really awesome person, you should hire me, as a summary, then you need to put that right up top as the very first thing that you see. And so most people end up burying the lead. I've seen people it was actually crazy. I saw a woman a week and a half ago who reached out to me. She just got laid off at Meta. She's been there for 5 years, leading their go-to-market strategy for some of their really top core products. Very impressive background. I think she has a PhD in consumer psychology, just like brilliant person. And she said that she had applied to over 100 jobs and hadn't gotten a single interview. And I looked at her resume and she had a summary that was about this thick. So first off, her heading was like this thick, right? Then her summary was like this thick. Then she had a summary of the summary. So a bullet point list that was like this thick of all of her best skills. And then 3/4 of the way down the page, the word Meta VP go to market appeared. And I was like, dude, you were the vice president of go to market strategy at a Mag 7 company. Get rid of all of the stuff in front of it. And the first word on your resume needs to be Meta, right? And I think that's true for a lot of people, and they think that they need a summary, but what it signals to a recruiter is that you have nothing else to talk about and you're trying to lead with fluff. And so I really, really despise summaries and objective sections. And then there's a new philosophy now, I can hear it maybe in one of your heads, about keyword harvesting within the summaries and the objectives. Well, what about trying to get through AI ATS systems? Are summaries useful for that in order to stack keywords on your resume and get through the first screen? And the answer is no, it's not useful, because A, you should be applying the jobs that you're qualified for. And if you are applying the jobs that you're qualified for, you're going to get through the AI ATS. It's not a mystery of how you get through the AI ATS system. You just need to be qualified. And they actually err on the side of inclusion because they don't want to exclude good candidates, because that's how the software ends up getting uninstalled. And then B, you still have to get through a human in order to get a interview. They're not going to schedule an interview without somebody looking at your resume first to make sure that you didn't get through the AI ATS just by keyword harvesting. And if they see an objective or a summary section with a bunch of keywords, they're just going to throw you in the no pile right away. So you're shooting yourself in the foot by trying to game the system that way. So everything I do is focused on the human resume screener, because that's still the great filter here and the great gatekeeper of who gets a resume. So that's number one that you're going to see is missing. And And then you'll see that the address is missing. That's very old fashioned. You don't need your full address. City, state is fine. In terms of your email, I kind of recommend the Gmail or something a little more modern, maybe your own website or a me.com. I think that Hotmails are kind of red flags for people who are a little ageist about, or AOL I've seen. And again, I'm very open that I'm not trying to be offensive when I talk about some of this stuff. I just try to tell people exactly what's going to get them the most interviews. And something else that you'll hear me say, and that's on my website, is if you have a difficult to pronounce name or an oddly spelled name or something that's not local, try to put a nickname, because there is a lot of subconscious bias that goes on with people who are screening the resumes. And then this is very simple. I mean, I don't think that my template is anything fancy, but good God, are there a lot of terrible templates out there? You can see very basically, we don't do a lot of bolding, company names and dates, right? And then maybe one per work experience to really draw their eye to a key result. I like to use sub bullet points for that as well to really draw the eye there. I love leading with a company overview in each work experience section, because company numbers usually dwarf individual contributor numbers. So you might say, yeah, I'm a software engineer at Meta, which is cool. But if you say that, like, I'm a software engineer working on products with 1.4 billion users worldwide, that, or, if your company's revenue is in the hundreds of millions of dollars, or if they're a Fortune 100 company, or if they have $1 billion market capitalization or a large valuation privately, those are all really awesome to lead with. So I love leading with company overviews to anchor the screener on a big number. I'm a big fan of going work experience, education, skills, and certs. For a functional resume, if you're trying to transition careers, go from one vertical to another, you can lead with skills if you don't have any relevant work experience. For people that have relevant work experience that's older and more recent experience that's less relevant, you can do a relevant work experience section and then an other work experience section underneath that if you want to go out of chronological order. And I really love including your graduation month and year. I don't like leaving anything off the resume. I like to tell a full story of someone. I think that if you leave things off because you're worried about how they'll be perceived, you're just creating red flags in somebody's mind or open questions, and they will fill those questions with the least generous imagined answers that they can as a screener, because they're trying to go through 1,000 resumes a day and get 20 interviews, and they may lose 20 or 30 good people by moving as quickly as they do through the resumes, but they're going to get through that pile in 5 hours, which means they're going to do 200 an hour, 3 every minute, 1 every 20 seconds. And so the greatest mistake I see that people make is believing that they're reading every word on this resume. And so you'll also notice it's a one-page format, and I am really, really brutal about trying to convince people to get it to one page. And I know it might seem like cutting off your arm or cutting off your leg when you leave off parts of your work and parts of projects that you poured your heart and soul into 15 or 20 years ago. But the reality is, and I say this, I teach pitching at Techstars how to pitch on demo day. If you're leaving a lot of good stuff on the cutting room floor, everything else that's left should be a fucking banger. And so if you're cutting out great stuff from the background of your career, every single line on this resume should just be so impressive, right? If you're like, oh, I had to cut this thing that was really great. Okay, that means the next thing that you left that won that battle of what's to cut is going to be phenomenal. So it actually ends up creating a much stronger resume when you leave things out and leave things to talk about during the interview. And overall, that kind of brings it back to maybe a centering piece here, that resumes are not a way to describe your life story. They are not a representation of oneself on an 8x11 sheet of paper. They are a tool to get a phone call. And they're in a very emotional document when you think about it normally. But if you stop to think and say, okay, this is just a tool to get a phone call, it becomes a lot less emotional. And I find that people really get into their own heads about resume building and how to craft it and how to write it and what the verbiage is. I really recommend straightforward, plain language. You are not orchestrating anything. You are event planning. You're not a conductor in front of a concerto. You are, you're a marketing coordinator, and so like I like to use plain language with stuff like this.
Thank you for watching. We host a free to attend session every Monday from 1 to 2 p.m. Eastern.